Welcome to Up Next, here with Ron, Johnny, and Tim. Today we got a few topics. We want to kick it off with building with AI. So a little background, a little context. I am an engineer. I've been building the hard way for 20 plus years. Ron and Tim have been in other industries. Tim's done a lot of marketing. Ron's been in revenue and sales, and they've recently picked up building with AI and try some of these new tools. So, really want to get their perspective and their experience on what it's been like. And I think maybe starting with just before you built your first project, like what went through your mind? Did you think it was even possible? I know you've been seeing things on Twitter and YouTube, and were you skeptical or kind of what was your emotion or mindset going into it? Start with you, Ron.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I did, I obviously see all the threads on Twitter. I watched several YouTube videos of people building this out, like, building small projects and things like that. And so, yeah, I was a bit reluctant to, I had a couple different ideas, side hustle ideas, but reluctant to kick it off just straight away. And so I finally did after some convincing. I dove into it a couple days ago, and I mean, yeah, initial thoughts. Again, I'm not technical, right? Like I don't have a background in coding, so to me, like I was essentially kind of going in blind. But I mean, I used what I had, so I went to an LLM, and I'm like, help me. Here's the idea I have, and help me build a prompt. Like, how would I prompt? How would I best do that? So I actually used that to build the initial prompt, and it was pretty lengthy and pretty detailed. And so I kicked it off with that, and then just from there on, just mind blown at how quickly like it built out a framework for me, and like a real a good starting point for me to like just start tweaking and fine tuning. And it was mind blown at how quickly it built out this idea that I had. And then from then on, yeah, it was pretty straightforward. Like again, I think the quality of the work, the result is all based on how you prompt, right? How well you prompt. So I think I spent the most time doing that. Like, okay, I knew what I wanted it to do, but how would I best prompt it? And the challenge that I have is I don't know all the terminology. So as I get the response back, so in this case, I'm using bolt.new, right? So as it tells me what it's done, I see the terms that they use, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. So now going forward, I'm going to refer to this as they said it, right? So like I'm learning the vocabulary and the terms that way, which is helping. And so anyway, saving with time and the prompting and whatnot. But generally, it's impressive, man. It's done really really well. I mentioned to you guys yesterday, like obviously the images and things like that, still great, but like obviously take a different route with some of the images that I wanted to use and things like that. But the functionality, like, gosh, within minutes, like, it was functioning, about 80% of the way of like what I wanted. And yeah, so now tweaking, fine tuning. Obviously, like it screws up here and there, right? There's been some minor things that it'll do that I'm like, okay, I got to fix that now or readjust that, or I didn't prompt it properly. I did get stuck this morning, and it was a single prompt, but it was a big one in hindsight, and it basically froze on me. So then I had to leave, came back, and it was still loading. So I paused it, and I asked it to revert, right? So basically like undo what I asked it to do, and it froze there as well. So I broke it. That's where I'm at. But up until that point, like, just mind blowing. Like the app idea I have is essentially like 75-80% of the way there. Now I didn't want to bloat it too much. There's some more I want to add to it, but I wanted to like keep it real minimal and not bloat it up too much at the beginning. Like I wanted to get it to a really good spot before I start adding to it and build up to it. But it's just learning a ton. But for me, the learning curve is the terminology. Like I don't understand the vocabulary, and so I'm just learning by reading what it's telling me that it's done. I'm like, okay, so and then again, just going into ChatGPT or Gemini and like asking it to help me like phrase and prompt and everything. So
Yeah. And before I get to Tim here, this is the first mistake you'll make as a rookie is that you say, "Oh, I'm 80% of the way there." You're really 1% of the way there. Uh, that getting that last 20% that glues everything and gets it working
right,
together takes an infinite amount of time more to
yeah,
to complete. And this is back before LLMs and no code tools, and even now with LLM and no code tools, getting that last sort of that last mile is always the hardest piece, and
For
some
sure,
people
for
never get
sure.
there. So
Yeah,
Tim, how
yeah,
about
for
you? You
sure.
you've been going at it a little bit longer. Ron's about a week in, maybe less than that, and you're more than maybe a few weeks in.
Yeah,
So what's your experience been like?
I'm like 3 or 4 weeks in. Yeah, I'm similar to him. I saw it on YouTube because I kind of live on YouTube. That is literally my whole form of entertainment. I don't really like Netflix or anything else. And so I started seeing it, popping up. And originally, I wasn't really like too interested in it because I mean, there's been no code tools before that. They were just always clunky, and you could never get to or I could never get to a real end result. Uh, so I was just like, whatever, it's AI, everyone's on AI, whatever. But I finally watched a podcast, and a guy was talking about it, and he kind of started building with it, like on the podcast, and they were just kind of, showing how well it worked. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So yeah, I just jumped on, and I actually started with V0, just playing around, and didn't really love it. And I was like, "There's got to be something better." So started doing some more research, and I actually found Bolt.new as well. And I was just blown away with like what you could do, just literally like talking to it like it was a designer. I didn't go the route of like asking another AI to help me prompt it. I just like started just talking to it. I was like, "Hey, this is what I want to do. Let's start with this," and just kind of started playing around with that. And then also too, I didn't know a lot of the terminology, so I'd be like, "Hey, what does the box with this in it? What is that called?" And then it would tell me like what it's called, and I'm like, "Okay, now so I was burning tokens learning that way." Ron was a little smarter by just like reading what it said. But yeah, no, I mean, it's been really cool once I kind of got the hang of how it worked, and kind of how to prompt it better. And I was always like trying to overload it. I would give it like 50 different things I wanted to do, and then I kind of learned, okay, let's just take it one step at a time, because it would constantly break itself and have problems. So yeah, once I kind of learned how all that worked, I went from struggling for a couple weeks to in just a few days I had a much more flushed out product.
Yeah. And so, this is an interesting. You said no code tools, and you said AI builders. So there's a quite a big difference between the two. And no code tools were kind of the thing everybody was using. Non technical people were using for a long time to build things, and they're cool. You got things like Bubble and Retool, but AI builders are a completely different ballgame. The issue with no code builders is they have a lot of walls. They have a lot of constraints, and you kind of have to build things based within that constraint system that they have. And so you end up, when you're trying to build something that's innovative, you end up hitting walls of like, oh, I want to do this, and you can't for whatever reason. And so those tools are really good for like your typical internal app in a business that is going to read from Excel or from your CRM and display some dashboard, but they're not always the greatest tool for if you want to build a social app, or if you want to build a consumer app or a B2B marketplace. Those are going to struggle in that environment. AI builders is a blank canvas, right? You could do whatever you want. You could build those simple tools, or you could build an extravagant tool. Now, where people are going to trip up is that like you can't build Facebook with it, right? You can only build usually simple prototypes, right? In many cases, I still think the AI tools are in a place where you can only build prototypes, because by the time you need to go to production, very often need actual developers. Now the tools are getting better. You can deploy to Superbase or other places, and they'll get you to a certain place. But then you'll run into issues when you want to enhance the product and add features. You're going to start running into migration issues and data issues. And then if you're not a developer, you might run into security issues where you've leaked tokens and API keys and user security. So it's actually very scary. But as a prototyping tool, it's phenomenal. Everybody should be using it for prototyping. Going from prototype to production and making money, that's a bit of a different ballgame. I don't know that we're there yet, but people shouldn't be deterred. They should still keep going down that route, and hope to eventually the tool catches up. Now, Ron, you started with
Yeah.
more of a no code tool for a product you wanted to build, and I tried and tried and tried to convince you, like, no, you're going the wrong route. Did I actually convince you, or are you still not convinced? I'm curious.
No, no, it wasn't so much that I needed to be convinced. Like, I think one of the things, like, first off, I'm super curious, right? And I want to because like Tim, I live on YouTube as well. I live on X, so a lot of it is me like diving in to learn and understand the product, because I hear people mention it, right? And I'm like, oh my God. And by the way, like the list of things, tools that are mentioned is ridiculously long. Like every week there's a new tool, and I'm like, dang, I haven't even like gotten halfway through my list. So partly it's that, is I'm curious, like I want to get hands on, and I want to dive into the product, and even if it's just for the free, the free version of it. So that's number one. And then number two, on that particular project, I had watched some YouTube videos, and the tools that were referenced and mentioned were some of those tools that I started to look into, because I'm like, well, if they're doing well with it and they're building on it, let me scope it out, let me check it out. So it's basically just happened to be that that's the route I took initially for that project. But yeah, during all this, I'm also hearing about Bolt.new. I'm watching videos on it. Obviously you see the threads on X, and it's like people are building games and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I knew that was there. But anyway, I gave it a try, and yeah, I was on, was it Webflow? So I jumped on Webflow, by the way. If you haven't, I mean, great tool, but to me, it was like Photoshop meets Pro Tools. If you guys are familiar with those, like it is dense, which is great. So people might love that, and they enjoy working in that type of environment. But like, it's definitely not user friendly. And there's a lot of customization you can do with it. But man, the amount of study that you would have to do to understand how to do the most basic thing with Webflow is crazy.
It's so funny you say that, because I find Webflow to be probably the best designed and easiest tool to learn in the market relative to all the others. So
yeah,
again, you're coming from a perspective of like, I've never used these tools. That one seems dense, seems very complicated, seems like it could take long. That's actually probably your fastest route to get to live. If you're building like landing pages and very simple widgets, there's much more complicated routes. And like if I said, hey, Ron, go figure out how AWS works, like then you'd be in for a world of pain. That's even developers have a hard time figuring that out.
And maybe it's because, again, not being from that world, when you see, to me, when you go into Webflow, you see 1,000 things you can edit all at once. You see, and I'm exaggerating, but you see 100 tools, on your dashboard. You see, like, so there's so much that maybe it's more so that, okay, like, yeah, this is simple to do if you know where to find it. And so that's what I mean by the learning curve, is like, oh my gosh, you jump in and there's like so much you can do and so many different things. But if you're not from that world, it's like, okay, you're, again, like if you're learning Photoshop for the first time, what are you doing? You're just screwing around, right? You're just clicking on stuff and you're like, what does this do? What does that do? And you're breaking things. So there's a lot of that where I'm like, I'm wasting a ton of time. And to understand, like, to learn what I do. And then again, like, you break stuff. So now you're like, well, I got to undo what I just did. So yeah. So I don't doubt it. It's a great tool. I mean, I had fun with it, but in terms of time, I'm like, yeah, this is not like super quick for me.
And Tim, you said you used no-code tools before. Do you want to compare and contrast sort of the no-code versus now the AI builders, how it's different?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that I've got like a great example. I just kind of like jumped on a few different little things, like when that stuff's kind of first started coming out, and like I said, I just found it clunky. Like, even if you take it back to like the way back in the day, like what was it?
You're gonna say Dreamweaver, aren't you?
Dreamweaver, yeah.
Not a no-code tool, but I hear you.
Right. But like those types of things, I always just like, the idea of it in my head, because I just was never a coder, was, because I Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, like all of that stuff. So like something like that was like really intriguing to me. But I could never get anything to actually flush out and look halfway decent. Yeah, so that's why like even when like no code tools and stuff like that first started coming out, I was just like, it's gonna be the same as it always has. So yeah, I've always struggled with web design, and I've got like ideas, but I could just never get them out. Even like WordPress and stuff like that, which is like super simple stuff, but like I would have this idea of what I wanted to build, and I would start building and then get stuck and break something and then have to start all over again. And so it was always one of those things where I just struggled, and then started playing around with these AI tools, and I was just blown away. Like, holy cow, I can actually get out like what I want. It can kind of understand what I'm trying to put out and code it. And so yeah, this is the first time I've actually been pretty excited about actually getting my ideas out there.
Yeah, that's cool. Ron, you mentioned one thing about, you're curious, you're trying to learn the stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
When I first got into development many, many years ago, my goal was like, I want to learn it all. I want to learn all the languages. And that time there was a handful, right? There was more than that. They were academic, but they were a handful of sort of commercial programming languages. And I went down the route of learning, 20 hours a day, just learning and studying everything. And what I learned is the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know shit. The more I realize there's more to learn, and the whole, the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper on every topic, and you can go many layers of expertise more.
Yeah.
And as every year went by, the technology moved faster and faster, like exponentially getting faster, and more languages, more frameworks, more,
Yeah.
tooling. And at some point, you just have to choose, right? You have to place a bet and say, I'm going down this route, and stop learning, because otherwise you will learn forever and never learn anything and never get anything done.
Yeah.
And with the AI stuff, it's actually so much harder to keep up because it's moving at an incredible pace.
Yeah.
I can't keep up. I try to, but and I'm a full time. This is my
Yeah.
full time job, is keeping up with this stuff and using it. And I've got developer friends that are professional developers, and they're 3, 4, 6 months behind. In terms of all the AI stuff, like they're not even caught up because their job doesn't, allow them to even play with this stuff. There's just so much out there, and they're always
Yeah.
sending me messages like, "Hey, what are you using now? What are you using now?" Like every week, because they know like I'm changing it up because new tools come up and you try them. And,
Yeah.
and often it's a case of the people that you respect and follow in the industry, their word means a lot sometimes. And if you see that a lot
They're
of people you
vetting them
follow are
out.
using a specific tool,
Yeah.
then you might go give it a try. But until I've seen something that starts to pop up as this tool is getting traction, I usually kind of ignore it. I'll read about it, but I won't watch YouTube videos because there's just not enough time in the day to follow everything and then still get shit done.
Yeah. 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 No doubt. No doubt.
So what else in terms of the AI tools? Like what glaring questions do you guys have? That's like, man, I still can't figure this out, or is there anything that kind of came to mind while you're fresh in this world?
Oh, I mean, we don't have enough time on this episode, man. There's so many questions. I'm like, okay, but I'm trying not to overwhelm myself because I don't want to like just be inactive because I'm just ruminating over like all the questions. So I'm like, just one thing at a time, one thing at a time. But yeah, like you asked me, for example, you asked me earlier today, like, what database are you using? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't, and I went back in and I'm like, it doesn't tell me what, like, so I was going to ask you, like, where do I look? But then what did I do? I went to the gym, I got on the treadmill and I looked up, bolt.new databases, and then I started watching a tutorial on like, what to do there. And so anyway, so like, that's one question, right? Like, I'm like, I haven't even gotten to that step yet. And I don't know.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
And again, this is the great thing, but also the bad thing. I mean, it's pros and cons of tools like Bolt and Lovable, is that they're doing things behind the scenes that you don't have to even know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
But at the time
It's
comes,
crazy.
like, wait, where did my data go? Like these people entered their personal information, and I have no idea where it went. Is it on the
Indeed.
browser? Is it in memory? Is it in a database? I have no idea. So yeah,
It's the tip of the iceberg, right?
sure is. How about you, Tim?
I mean, I'm not really stuck right now. I kind of ran into some problems like Ron did as far as I feel like Bolt.new is really good at certain things, but like if you give it a prompt and then you forget to, or something breaks and you like stop it and then you like ask it to revert, I don't know what happens in the code, but something happens in the code and it just breaks. Like you can't get it back. So I've got one project that I want to like go back and figure out what's going on, and I just haven't taken the time to do it yet. But yeah, I've got one of those that's just broken and I can't get it to preview. I can't get it to do anything at this point. So maybe we'll have some one-on-one coaching at some point and you can look at it with me.
Yeah. Which
And
it's
this
funny.
is something that developers, professional developers, use a tool to help with this called GitHub. And what they do is they have to check in their code. After they finish a task, they'll check in the code, so there's a version saved of it at that point in time, and then they'll add more code and they'll check in code and they'll add more checking code. In the early days, no one did that, and I can't imagine how they did it before GitHub came around and tools like it. What Bolt and some of these tools are doing, they're doing something kind of like that behind the scenes, where they're trying to save snapshots, but it's not quite the same. You can run into issues where like you install a library and then they can't revert the library for whatever reason. And so it gets really, really tricky sometimes to debug these things if you're not using a tool like GitHub, because these tools aren't very good at reverting yet, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
They'll let you go backwards, like undo, but it's not always clean. So if those programs. Again, I haven't used Bolt. I know about it. I've looked at it. I watched some videos, but I don't use it because the developers typically use more integrated tools like Cursor or Windsurf, or just VS Code with Copilot. And so I don't really have a need for Bolt outside of more just intellectual curiosity. But I would imagine they have like something that says, hey, check in or commit or save a snapshot. And if they do, you should be doing that often, and don't let it do it on your behalf, but sort of it should be a forcing function for you to actually
Manual.
go and do it, so that if you do need to go back, and especially if you can write a comment, like that'd be the ideal, because that's when you commit to GitHub, you're committing code and you're giving it a comment or a message like, hey, I added this feature, I updated the landing page, I did this. So if they have
That's
that
cool.
in Bolt, you should be adding that
So
comment,
it's like a
this is what I just
log.
completed. Test
Yeah.
it, make sure it works. Add that. Again, I would assume they have it,
As
and you
far
guys
as
just
I've
haven't
seen,
discovered it.
yeah, as far as I've seen, there's nothing like that. It does after each prompt, and if it does code for you, it like kind of saves a snapshot right there, and you can revert to that.
Yeah. You can
But
revert
we have,
back to
I
that
think
one.
we've both run into issues where it's like, even when you revert back to like the last thing that was working, it still is broken. And that was another thing that I kind of learned, like, okay, instead of like I would want it to fix one part of the code, but then it would change something else in another part of the code. So I'd have to like tell it, hey, I want you to update this or change this, but don't touch any of the other code. And then I ran into a lot less problems. So you almost have to like tell it, like, I want you to do something, but I don't want you to touch any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why. I just sometimes would think that, like, well, you're updating that, let's change this too. And it's like, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, it's super hard for it to know, right? Because context, it's always a question of context, like what is the context, and if you're working at a project, it doesn't know like, oh, I got to look at the whole project because I might need to update things in multiple places.
Right.
And so something that again is helpful in a tool like Cursor, and again I would hope that Bolt and these tools have something similar, is you could provide a set of rules, kind of global rules. In Cursor, they're called Cursor rules. We go in and then say, hey, I always want you to name things like this. I don't want you to, when I ask you to do something, don't change code that I haven't asked you to, haven't asked you to change. Just change the things I asked you to change. So you can give it all kinds of instructions.
Yeah.
And again, maybe Bolt has something like that, where it's like Bolt rules that you can kind of give it high level instructions, so you don't have to repeat yourself over and over again.
Yeah, I'm sure if
Have you
you,
got-
maybe even in like the setup, if you kind of outlined all of that stuff, it would kind of work off of that. But if you just jump in there and
So,
start,
yeah.
there's no rules.
And I was gonna say, Tim, that's what the LLM helped me build out in the initial prompt, was that. So
Right.
those guidelines were in there. I mean, it was lengthy response, and yeah, it was all these things I didn't even think about. Right, like I had no clue. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's gonna be helpful.
Again, this is your prompt that you're giving a prompt. What you want a lot of that data to be is in sort of like a global repository, so that every time you prompt it, it can refer back to that thing as well. It's like, okay, what are the rules? Because every time you prompt it, it's not always using all the messages and all the context before it, right? Because that can get really lengthy and long, and then the code base, if it's big, so it can only jam so much context into the sort of the next question. So it's important to have like a set of rules that it always refers to that isn't really long, or PRD, or like a product requirements document that says, hey, this is what I'm trying to build. This is sort of the UI requirements, always do this, make buttons like that, whatever. If you have that as well, and some of the logic, and they can refer to that, again, these programs usually have something that allows you to add these documents to context, so that you don't have to repeat that over and over again every time you prompt it, because otherwise it's just going to take the prompt you gave it and think that that's everything, and then it might assume some things that are not correct.
Yeah, that's good to know. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah.
That's good. I was just going to mention real quick that I watched an episode of the co-founder of Bolt.new. He was on Eisenberg's podcast, and he talked about, he's like, basically my job is debugging all day long, every day. I'm just going in and just like fixing and debugging, which again gave me a little bit of like, oh, okay, like we're talking about some of the issues we're running into. He mentioned like that's his job, is fixing the issues that they're seeing every day. So I think they're still learning, right? Still adjusting. And how long do you know how long they've been around, Johnny?
Not long.
Well, StackBlitz, the company that makes
Stack.
Bolt.new, has been around for a long time, but Bolt's brand new.
But this product,
Bolt's brand new. They're Lovable, same thing. They pivoted like 3 times and changed the name, and then finally Lovable took off. But before that, they were getting no traction. Cursor has an interesting story too, but again, they just catch fire right now. Everybody's trying to build products, so they're all catching fire at the same time. Yeah, the bugging is always going to be just part of the job, whether you're an actual developer or whether you're using LLM tools. The frameworks, when you write code and you build products, you're not writing code from scratch. You're leveraging millions and millions and millions of lines of code that have been contributed over the last who knows how many years that are sitting in libraries and repositories out there. And when you say, hey, build me this, Bolt and stuff are pulling in these packages into your project, and it's leveraging code that's been written by thousands of developers, open source tools. And so those packages have bugs too, right? Because all code has bugs. And when you're trying to bring in packages and code from all these different disparate places, things are going to work. There's going to be collisions. There's backwards compatibility issues where there's new features in iOS, the browser that doesn't work with the old stuff. And so you're all constantly dealing with these conflicts, and the LLMs have no way to resolve that usually, right? And so there's always going to be problems no matter what. And software is going to have problems because of the way it's built, in that you don't have a blank canvas. You say, hey, I'm writing every line of code. No, you're pulling in the minute you start a project, you're already relying on millions and millions of lines of code just in the frameworks, not even thinking about the operating system and things like that are lower level, but just the frameworks, that web framework or that mobile framework, you've already pulled in millions and millions of lines of code just for something that says hello world.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But surprisingly, like, we're talking a lot about debugging and whatever, but like, I'm amazed at how well it spits out code and how well everything works without any real contribution other than the idea. You know what I mean? So it's pretty amazing how far these things have come, and
I agree
how well they work.
It's absolute magic. Fucking magic. As a developer, I could do things now in 3 hours that would have taken me a month.
Crazy.
And it gets to the things that are predictable that I know I can do, but they just take a long time to do.
Right.
A lot of the repetitive stuff. And it lets me focus on the things that are more innovative, like no one is doing. And that's the thing that most developers will be like, oh, I want a UI that does that. It can do that really well. But the minute you want to do something more innovative, that's there, because you got to remember how do these things work? They're just taking all the open source code out there and learning, being trained on that. And there's a lot of code on building UIs, and there's frameworks on that. But if you're doing something no one's ever done before, that's going to be a little harder for it to do because it's never seen that. It hasn't been trained on that kind of information. So sometimes, your developer cap is still as useful. And I think the people that have benefited the most from these tools are actual developers,
right?
Because we can get through all that tedious stuff quickly. And then when we hit a debug issue, we know how to debug it because we know how to read code, and we've seen that before. Right. So we don't trip up as long. We're able to get through that issue much faster. So developers are super happy. The only thing is, in terms of productivity, they're not so happy because a lot of companies aren't hiring as much, right? They're laying people off because people are more productive. So there's definitely maybe more developers now than there needs to be. So you got to really be on top of your shit, be a good developer, and know these AI tools to be employable nowadays.
Makes sense.
Cool. All right. Well, while we're on AI, let's talk about Grok 3. X recently launched their latest version of their LLM called Grok 3. This one is interesting because they, Elon and X built the world's largest supercomputer. I think it was 100,000 GPUs, I think H100s, which is enormous. And they built it in a very fast time. And they trained the model in this new cluster. I don't know if they used all the GPUs, but they trained it there. And so far, it seems pretty good. So I want to get your guys' thoughts. If you guys have used it, what are your initial thoughts on Grok? So Tim, starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't use many other AIs before Grok. When I kind of got into AIs, Grok 2 was out, and I was playing around with it. And then, I've just naturally kind of gone to Grok 3 now. So I don't have a ton of experience of comparing OpenAI or what's Google's
Gemini.
I just don't have a ton of experience playing around with it. I've jumped on them. I've played around with them a little bit, but I just don't have a ton of experience. I think Grok has actually been my go-to for as long as I've been playing with AI. So I don't have a lot to compare to. I like it. I'm impressed.
Well, compare 2 to 3.
It seems very much the same. But I mean, I feel like it should feel that way, right? I don't think Grok 2 was bad. I've seen the stats and stuff at how much better Grok 3 is, but to me, it's just always worked well. So yeah, I'm kind of a boring person on this.
Now, I only used Grok 2 a little bit because it was so embedded inside of Twitter. It was hard to get to.
Yeah.
So the UX wasn't great. I recently downloaded the app, so now it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, the standalone.
But the one question I had with Grok 2, was it multimodal? Meaning, sorry, not multimodal. It was multimodal. Did it do, because Grok 3 has these two little tabs at the
The
bottom where it says
think and
thinking and deep research.
yeah,
I'm
it
guessing those are new, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are, again,
See, and I haven't really dug
obviously-
into those too much. Yeah. To me, it's again,
Isn't-
it feels like Grok 2, but it's those two new tabs. From what I've seen, I've played around with it a little bit, and it's kind of explains why it's thinking a certain way, or like, well, on second hand, maybe we should do this, or like, you know what I mean? So it feels a little more intuitive that way than it used to. Other than that, I haven't seen too much of a difference. But yeah, those are two new features that I just haven't played around with enough yet.
Yeah. I mean, I love thinking and deep research. Again, when you're playing with these tools, you have to know when to use which LLM, right? Some of them are just, I just need a quick answer. Like, give me 5 names, for this.
Right.
Quick answer. Doesn't need to think, doesn't need to do deep research on the web. But if you're saying, hey, I'm trying to find, the 20, best hotels, that offer this, and this amenity, whatever. Then you do deep research, because then it's going to go out to the web and try to collect that information. Or I'm looking for studies that have, maybe talked about this particular, disease or case study. It's going to go out on the web and look for that information and return it, because it's probably not in the model, right? The one-shot model where you just ask and get a response. So
yeah, I think
depending on your question, you should know how to use the right model.
Yeah, in Grok 3, it actually does, though. It'll show you, like, search 20 websites, and then you can click on it. It'll show you, like, the breakdown of it, and it'll show you, like, how many X posts it's referencing. And
Wow.
so that is new. And you don't even have to be in, like, the thinking or the deep research model for that. You can ask it a question, and it'll just, like, post that up at the top. And I noticed today that I could click on it, and it would show me all the articles that it's, basing whatever information off of. So, yeah, that's a difference there.
Yeah. How about you, Ron? What's your experience with Grok so far?
I have none. No experience in Grok, man. I'm looking forward to it though. I've been seeing all the hype, obviously, on X, and but yeah, I've been using others. So Gemini and ChatGPT, between those two is kind of where I spend most of my time. But yeah, so that's next is Grok 3.
Yeah, and I think that points to a larger problem that the X team has, is that how do you build an audience for this tool? You're a Twitter user. I'm a Twitter user. I kind of had to force myself to use Grok because, one, they're late to the game, and the previous version, like I said, was in the app and a little hard to get to. Tim was we're all Twitter users, but Tim was the only one that used it regularly. I usually go to OpenAI or Claude as my two main LLMs, and I have to remind myself of Grok, but I can't see my brothers or sisters or friends using Grok when OpenAI has built such a name brand. Even Claude, like Claude is an amazing LLM, especially for coding. It doesn't get the amount of downloads or the amount of traffic that ChatGPT is, because they've built such a name recognition that they're the go-to, even when they might not be the best LLM for a particular thing or the best cost. It's hard to compete on name recognition, and Grok. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to get it with that name either. I mean, it's a good name. It's a good technical name. It's a great technical name.
I love the logo. The logo is like the best logo for sure. But I agree, the name just doesn't roll off the tongue like it should.
Yeah, it's for developers. I mean, we use Grok all the time. Like, did you Grok that topic? Grok is a way to pull information, from like servers or whatever. There was like old Unix tools called Grok where you can set it to pull information. So for technical people, like, Grok is the way we speak. It's like, like we'll say ping me when you're done. That's another technical term. So I think some of these have reached mainstream. They're not purely technical, but those are very meaningful to technical people. But like I said, Grok is going to be something that's going to struggle, I think, mainstream, because it is a very technical term.
I think the one thing, and honestly, the reason that I kind of started playing around with it was Elon tweets about it a lot, and I have like notifications whenever he tweets from my meme coin days. So yeah, I mean that may help it, because he's got a ton of followers and stuff, so it may get it some mainstream. Plus, he's gotten a lot of press off of Grok 3, so. I don't know. I can see more adoption happening.
He is enormously influential and famous on Twitter. But like I said, when I think about like friends, family, none of them are Twitter.
Yeah.
Well,
so we just kind of live in this bubble. Like,
yeah,
we do live in the in a Twitter bubble because we love Twitter. We've always been
mainstream. in the mainstream, he's being demonized. So that's not helping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we're in a bubble for sure. He's in a bubble.
All right. Well, moving on from AI, we're running. That was a long topic, but I want to make sure we get to this very hot topic right now.
Yes.
Everyone's talking about it right now. The prices of eggs.
Come on.
And how are you guys keeping eggs in your refrigerator?
Forget prices. Yeah, I couldn't get any eggs. It's been like 3 weeks I've had issues finding eggs. So yeah, I couldn't find eggs yesterday. Found them today. Got 2 dozen. Yeah, it's wild. So I got some stats, right? And so I'll share this. So first off, the bird flu, right? We hear like the bird flu is what's causing this issue. 419 million birds in just the past 5 months have been wiped out due to the bird flu.
And they were culled. They weren't wiped out.
I was going to say wiped out is a little misleading because all these birds were killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were destroyed.
True. And the issue is that it's not just affecting the hens, but it's affecting chicks. And Tim, you're the expert here, so you can probably elaborate more on that. But that's a big issue because it's going to affect generations. All right. So that's number 2. 3. Speaking on prices, John. So last year, prices for a dozen eggs were on average $2.52. They're now $4.95. And what's even worse is that egg prices are up 219% from 2019. Ridiculous.
Wait. Where is anybody finding $4.90-something eggs? Everywhere I go, they're $8 at least.
True. That's the national average. So it's probably like in Missouri and Oklahoma.
Yeah, because like here in Texas, if you get like not like cage free or pasture raised or anything like that, you can still get them for like $3-4.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, definitely not. This is not including pasture raised like what we're getting. That's ridiculous. Yeah, but then again, Timmy, you could probably elaborate on this, but it's predicted to continue rising. Like they're saying that this is not the worst of it. Like it's going to continue to get worse, and possibly prices might increase another 20 to 25%.
Tim, you're the expert.
I am.
What do you think?
I am in no way, shape, or form an expert. I do have chickens, so I get to walk to my backyard and get my groceries. But I mean, it's just crazy to me that what it comes down to is the way that we get our food is just bad. It's all industrialized, and so we've got millions of birds all in one place. And of course, you get a virus in there, and they're all stacked on top of each other. Don't see daylight, don't ever see anything besides, this commercial feed that it's fed. Of course that it's going to just run rampant, and then it just makes sense to cull the whole flock because eventually everyone's going to get it. But, I mean, for me, like, we raise more like regenerative animals. And so, the most we have in any, we call them chicken tractors, is 25, and they get on fresh pasture every day. So they're out there eating grass, eating bugs, doing what natural things they should be doing. So so we don't have the same kind of problems because we don't have them stacked on top of each other. They have better immune systems because they aren't in these conditions. They aren't just sitting in their own waste and stuff like that. So I mean that's really. Also, too, like for me with pretty much any animal, but especially with chickens, like it's kind of survival of the fittest, right? Like I'll see these people that are like, oh yeah, I gave my chicken a bath today because it was having trouble. I'm like, how do you know it's having trouble? Because for me, it's like survival of the fittest. If they can't handle the weather, then like they're not going to be around. And the ones that do handle the weather, those are the ones that I'm getting their offspring, hardy. And their offspring is hardy, and so.
Right.
That's kind of just always been my view on animals in general. My wife, I kind of have to reel in a little bit because she's, she cares about them all, and she's wanting to, oh, we got to save this or save that. And I'm just like, man, if nature's cruel and I just let nature, you know what I mean? Like it's going to do what it's going to do.
She's got names for them?
Not really. Like a couple of the animals she does, but like we don't have every chicken named or anything like that. Actually, our cows have names.
I was about to say the cows have to have names.
Yeah, which it's it's a little hard because we used to get butcher box, and so we were still like going through that food, and then we also got a cow butchered recently, and so she would constantly ask me, "Is this Benjamin or is this butcher box?" Because Benjamin was the cow's name.
Man, what?
But yeah, so yeah, that's it's just going to keep getting worse unless we change the way we raise our food, or
So you're thinking this was inevitable just with the way.
yeah, it's
And I think one of the problems too is that we used to have a lot of smaller farms, and now they've all been bought up and moved into big mega complexes too.
yeah.
Which doesn't help.
Well, and it's hard to compete with those guys. Like, we sell eggs and we sell meat and whatever, and you can't sell that. You can't sell our stuff for those
Right.
prices.
Right.
But also, you look at a steak from my cow and you look at a steak from a grocery store. I mean, it's night and
Huge
day.
difference.
Yeah, even the eggs. I mean, the eggs, the yolk is so much more colorful, and we don't add paprika or stuff that they do to their feed. That's just natural. It's just they're more nutrient dense. They're just better. But if you're going to the grocery store and you're already struggling with the price of groceries, and then you have to add in the fact that it costs this farmer more to make whatever it is. It's tough to sell that. So
Yeah, it was great points and great insight. I had no idea about the paprika as a hack to make the yolk red. Because I see red, the more the red, I'm like, oh, this is even more natural. But you're telling me that they're lying to me. And I'm falling for it.
they fake
There's
it.
additives.
Yep,
in the
it's
feed.
they do.
Wow.
They feed them paprika, and it makes their yolk a like better, brighter yellow.
Yeah, brighter yellow.
Yeah, where we don't have to do that. It just naturally is like that. So
And then also, I got to call out UPS here because I haven't received my shipment of Benjamin.
Did you order some?
yeah, you gotta put in your order.
Love it.
No,
Yeah.
but I did last time I talked to Tim say I definitely want to reserve part of the next butchered cow just because I do want to taste the difference between a truly pasture raised cow. They all say it, but it's not always true.
Yeah,
And what I'm used to eating, which is usually Whole Foods.
And the chicken too. You got to get that good chicken.
yeah. We raise breasts here, and it's supposed to be kind of the filet mignon of chicken. I'm not gonna lie, there is a noticeable difference, but we're kind of early in that. So they're like a heritage breed where most people that are producing chicken, they're doing broilers, and like within 8 weeks, like they're ready to process. Like, where these take closer to like 16, 18 weeks. So obviously you're feeding them longer and you're taking care of them longer. So, it's more expensive, but these breeds are actually a lot better they have better immune systems and stuff like that, because they weren't engineered to be the fastest growing animal, on the planet. So,
Right.
so yeah, I'll have to send some of that out to you guys too, because it's phenomenally better than just regular chicken. So
Awesome.
I've heard that there are different. We're so used to eating the same store-bought chicken, but there are variations that will taste much better.
yeah, well, and that's part of why like they're having these outbreaks too, is because like these chickens have been engineered to,
Correct.
like literally, I've raised them before, and like they don't grow feathers. They do some, but like compared to a normal chicken,
Yeah.
not even close. They just put on weight. Like they can't even walk after about 8-9 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, they're that big. And the reason they don't want them to grow feathers is because it's easier to pluck a chicken that doesn't have feathers. You know what I mean? So they've done all these things, which, again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it's when you stack a million of them on top of each other and then expect them not to contract these diseases, it's just not going to happen. So there's my, expert egg and chicken advice there.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, one day I hope that I can raise my own chickens. It's a dream I've always had. I've got the space for it. I just don't think the HOA will allow me to do it. So I got to figure out a way to do it without them noticing.
Yeah. Good luck with
Especially now with the shortage and the prices. But even forget that, if there was no shortage and prices were low, I still would want to do it just because I think it's something that helps you respect nature.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt.
And the food system, when you can raise your own food or hunt your own food. I think every male should be there should be a rite of passage, and I didn't go through that as a young man, and I want to do it before my time's up.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. And by the way, fun fact, I learned that you need at least 4 chickens to produce a dozen eggs. Is that true, Timmy? A week. A dozen eggs a week.
Like, every chicken generally produces an egg a day. I mean, that's not always the case. Like, kind of depends too on like weather factors and stuff. Like, in the winter, they just don't produce like they do in the summer. In the summer, I was getting like 4 dozen eggs a day, where right now we're probably getting 12 to 18 a day. So, they slow down quite a bit. And each breed also, some are better layers than others and whatnot. But yeah, so it's I guess that's technically true, but yeah, there's a lot of variables there.
Let's wrap up on this topic with I just want to know this, just curiosity. What do you do after you grab the egg? Do you refrigerate it? Do you wash it? Like what do you do, and how long is it good for?
Yeah, so we're selling eggs so fast right now that it's not a problem. But before, we would generally just take them, put them in some kind of container, not washed, and put them in a separate refrigerator. And then when we would go to where we were ready to sell them, then you legally have to wash them. And then we'd go and sell it. But yeah, if you keep that, it's called a bloom on them, it keeps the egg preserved, and especially in a refrigerator. I mean, they can last like 4 or 5 months in a refrigerator, unwashed. I have heard that's that not washing them is kind of like a wives' tale or whatever. That you can wash them as long as you don't wash them with soap. It doesn't wash off the bloom, which I kind of believe, because like if you do wash it with just water, you can kind of almost feel like it's almost like sticky. So it's still there, but I would guess it, degrades it in some way.
A little bit, yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of what we do is we just take them unwashed, put them in a container, and then when we're ready to sell them, we wash them, put them in a brand new container with our labels on them and everything, and then send them out.
Awesome. Well, hope you guys have the information you need to start raising your own chickens. And
yeah, because that's the only option at this point. And Timmy, do you distribute to the community? Is it mostly local community that you guys?
So I'll be honest. My wife just sells them, and it's almost all to employees at the hospital. So yeah, like we've like everyone there just is like we're like 6 dozen eggs behind right now. Like we've got like people have paid for them, and we just can't keep up. And that's just like in a small community hospital. And she just kind of mentioned it to a few people, like, "Hey, I've got eggs," and so we are never hurting to sell eggs right now. I don't know how it'll be in the summer when we've got just a surplus, but I mean, at the rate we're selling them right now, we'll be fine, and we'll still be getting rid of them. Yeah, in fact, we're eating goose eggs right now because like every egg that comes through, we got to sell it. So
we'll cover goose eggs on the next episode.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could wrap up here. Excited to see what you guys learn and build over the next week. We could probably revisit the topic next time. One tip I'll leave out to everyone is that building groups if you can. It's very difficult when you go at this alone. It's very lonely to build things and run into issues and not have anyone to reach out to. So if you have the opportunity to grab a buddy or a friend, or even online, find someone that's also building and just build a tight-knit community with them, I would encourage you to do so. I think, Tim, myself, and Ron have all benefited in the last week by kind of holding each other accountable to build things and pushing each other forward and encouraging each other. So I would definitely recommend that. We may open it up to more people in our group. So if you're interested, leave us a comment. With that said, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.